Hey, I want you to imagine the best PD experience of 2025, and it's coming to you in March. It's the Red Carpet Campout, 90 minutes from Brisbane, luxury tents. There will be 10 dynamic people who love building connections, building communities, and generously sharing their ideas, and also love having a ton of fun. Are you one of those people? All the details are in the show notes if you'd love to book your tent, or send me a message on LinkedIn if you'd love to know more. Enjoy the episode.
Welcome to the First Time Facilitator podcast. Whether you're a first-time facilitator or a seasoned pro, listen in for tips and tricks to make a bigger impact at the next workshop you deliver. And now, your host, Leanne Hughes.
Hello and welcome to the show. I'm your host, Leanne Hughes, and I'm here to help you design fast, deliver strong without the stress. Hey, are you ready to rethink how conferences can inspire, connect, and energize people? Of course you are, because that's why you listen to this show. You're up for different ideas and ways of doing things. In today's episode, I'm joined by the incredibly awesome Mary-Louise Huppatz, or ML for short. She is the CEO of the Association for Tertiary Education Management, ATEM, and we met at the ATEM conference in September in Brisbane, where I was brought on as the conference catalyst. And I just wanted to jump on and talk to ML because of how impressed I was with the care that the organising committee really had for the delegates' experience and what they did. And ML, my guest today, is a passionate advocate of that, about creating events that can leave lasting impact. So if you've ever been to a conference that felt stale or overwhelming, or it felt kind of awkward when you arrived, you're going to love hearing some of the ideas that the ATEM committee incorporated to make this conference have such a wonderful community vibe. A bit about ML, as I said, she's the CEO of ATEM, where she describes her role as being the number one cheerleader for people working in the tertiary education sector. ML is passionate about creating learning experiences that build confidence, develop leadership, and help individuals thrive in their careers. By day, she's a strategic and innovative leader. By night, she moonlights as Rakali, a Joey Scout leader, where she nurtures the next generation of young leaders. ML brings creativity, energy, and a real focus on people into everything she does. I absolutely loved working with her as part of this conference, and so excited to share this conversation with you. If what you hear resonates with you today, definitely reach out to ML. I've got her contact details for LinkedIn, and share the love on social media. Also, while you're here in March 2025, you should definitely come to Brisbane. About 90 minutes away, I'm hosting something called the Red Carpet Campout. It's a small group retreat, luxury camping. I'm partnering with Steve DeMedio. This is going to be a combination of professional development versus workshopping versus camping versus leadership skills, community connection, and a ton of fun. All the details are in the show notes for this one. Enjoy the episode. I'm excited to welcome onto the First Time Facilitator podcast, Mary-Louise Huppatz, or ML for short. ML, great to have you here today.
Thank you for having me. Looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, me too. We've had some good times a few weeks ago in Brisbane, and I got to meet you, and I heard all about some of the conversations and workshops you were running as well, and your cool style that you bring into those. But first, I'd like to kick off. Can you tell us a bit about yourself and what kind of pivots and watersheds in your career led you to do the work that you do today?
I'm probably what I call a bit of a bitzer. I've had this career where I've moved around. Like, I studied journalism, I've worked in human resources, I've worked in strategy and planning. I've always been in and out of the facilitation space. It's an interesting one to think about. What are the things that make you change direction? There's a couple for me. I think one is I've had the opportunity to work with some amazing people who've seen something in me that I may not have seen. A couple of times they've put their hands firmly sort of in my back and pushed me forward and said, you need to do this. So that's been sort of serendipitous. I think there was also a moment probably about 15 years ago. I'd worked in corporate for a while, but I realised I was starting to become quite neutral, and I actually went through a process of giving myself permission to be me, and some of my managers around me and directors at the time let me do that as well. And I think that was a key one of going, actually, there's not a formula, but there's actually bring your strengths, bring who you are. And so that was another key moment. And there's a third one, which is really bizarrely a watershed moment. I became a Joey Scout leader through my son. Nothing I started to do, but every Thursday night I hang out with a group of 5 and 8-year-olds, and they have re-inspired me about my passion for people and leadership and the potential in people. And it has let me be creative and sparky and all of those things. So quite interestingly, something that I volunteer in has actually really helped shape and bring energy to my work now. Sorry, there was a real mix there.
I love that. I love that there's a mix. And even that sort of third point around something that was like, I'll do it for my son, I'll be a good parent and get involved. And then the knock-on effects of that, how that's impacted you. And I think an element you also mentioned there, someone like pushing you, like having other people sort of show that confidence in you. And actually, I want to pull up on the third thread just as well, because like every time I've hopped on a meeting with you, like you're just fun, you're just cool to be around. You keep it real and conversationally. You seem to not take it so seriously, even though you are professional. Like, I think you do that really well.
And I think that's like I said, I've been in lots of corporate environments. I've worked in retail, I've worked in business, I've worked in construction and property management. But I think over time, it's just realised I can be me. And I think one of the things I see, I see the positivity in people and what they do and the value they bring. And so I suppose over time I've just grown to be a bit more me and less a suit or less something. And it's actually quite freeing and liberating.
Yeah. And it is. And I think by you doing that, you also set the tone for everyone else around you to think, oh, it's okay for me to be in my skin and show up just as how I am.
I often talk about this. I remember a colleague I used to work with at a university, and he worked in a business role, and he was an amazing person. But as soon as he put on a suit jacket to go to a meeting, he changed. And that, I think that for me was a bit of a learning as well around you sometimes can play a role at work or think. I often see young up and coming leaders think, oh, I need to be like that person. I'm going to model myself like that. But actually, you've got to find your strengths and what you bring to a space, I think.
Yeah. And even like sometimes when I'm talking to someone and I hit record, like sometimes I'll even shift or just use a different voice. And then when you stop recording, then you kind of float back into normal. But I think the challenge is how do you be that person, whether you're being recorded or not?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think you do turn the dial up. I'm not like this all the time. I'm a bit of an ambi. I can be quiet and I can be bright and bubbly and sparky. But I worked with a dean a while ago who was a real introvert, but he had learnt that in particular spaces he had to turn the dial up. And it was interesting to watch that. He was still himself, but he would turn the dial up and do what he needed to and then find time and turn the dial down and step back and go.
Yeah, look, we all need that time, whether I think we're extroverts or introverts. Yeah. But when I did meet you a few weeks ago, it was at the ATEM conference in Brisbane, and you were very much you had the dialed up all week. Let's talk about conferences, and because this is all about facilitation, but conferences really are more than just an event. Like there's so many variables. Like, what do you think a conference really is all about?
Oh, so this is interesting. I often debate with people about is a conference an event, and I will say it's not, because to me an event is just a once-off. You go to the Logies, you've been there, and you can say to people, I was there. But a conference is much more than that, and it's a bit like a facilitated workshop or something like that, because it's sort of a designed experience. You talk about this in your book, actually, and I was struck by the comparators between it, because when you take people out of the workplace and you bring them all together, you need to make that valuable. It's not just, I went to the conference and it was good. They have to leave with something. So things that they want to try at work, energy to go back and try new things. They're connected with other people. They want to have these conversations. And conferences usually run on a cycle. So it's not just one experience. It's a designed, there should be a flow between those as well. I think, especially post-COVID, the conference space is really critical. And to think of it as an event undersells the potential and the return of investment that you get for paying for people to go there. Managers, employers, anyone who invests in you to go to a conference needs to get a return on that investment.
I don't want to be all religious here, but like kind of like a pilgrimage. Like it's like a journey. There's stuff. And I think the way, like when I was working with your team, like you had a delegate experience team, which is like so cool. I mean, like some of the conferences I work with, that's not even a thing. And so that's why I wanted to talk to you, because you did some really interesting things. Even like during the welcome drinks, you had the first hour was for first time attendees. So talk us through some of those cool experiences that you and your team crafted.
Yeah. So the delegate experience really comes from, and I think if you are responsible for a conference, you've got to walk the floor. You've got to have a sense of who's there, what they're looking for. you do surveys and you take the feedback from the survey, but you talk to people who are there and you watch them. One of the things for us is people arriving in a space where there's hundreds of people. How do you, like, walking into a drinks where there's 400 people and you don't know anyone? So we're really conscious of that. And so how do you step people into the conference space? How do you help them connect with a small group of people and then build and grow? So that first timers comes from that. We've had lots of feedback in our space. We run a number of conferences about people want time to network, but they're scared about networking. It's this big thing. We sort of try and build that in organically in a way. This year, we put 10-minute spaces between sessions so that as your session finished, you didn't have to rush out and get to the next one. You could actually talk to the person you'd been sitting next to, and you could walk out together. People don't realise we've done that for them to network, but it's a space that's there. We also did something with you, which was a lot of fun. It's the first time we've tried it, and it was these after lunch sessions. You know, after lunch, there's this lull of energy. People have food, but, you know, and so we did, and I still find it hard. We called them keystone sessions, but it was everybody at the conference did the same session. We didn't have them all in the same room, but 5 different rooms, but the same facilitated conversation or experience in each, that let people get to know each other organically again, but they were reflecting on what was happening at the conference and sharing their experience. And that has worked really well. I've just read the conference reviews, and for the most part, it's off the charts in terms of almost a sense of relief of I met people, but it didn't feel difficult.
Yeah. And look, I am an extrovert, but the second something is called networking, I feel like allergic to it as well. Like there's this extra pressure as opposed to just wanting to talk to someone and get to know them. Yeah.
I feel that, like, I went to your session with MBS. Gosh, is it 1 month, 2 months ago? I flew to Brisbane from Melbourne for that. And so I walked into a room where I didn't know anyone, and you feel that, oh, how do I start talking to people? It's not natural for me. As soon as we say this is networking, I just think it amplifies our fears or vulnerabilities or something.
Yeah, definitely. And even I think the word icebreaker can also trigger that for many people. I just don't use the word icebreaker. You kind of will do things to break the ice, but you don't call it now is icebreaker time, because it kind of, again, sets off the defense mechanism. And thank you so much for flying up for the event. Like,
I loved it.
Just curious, like, what was it? Just MBS was in town, and I'm just so curious why people come to events.
Oh, so that was a combination of different things. I've had MBS on my radar. I've got his coaching book, and I think I've always been keen to see him. But I'd also come across you through LinkedIn and some other people that I really liked. I'd seen the post, and so I'd been sort of not stalking, but curious about what you were doing. So when I saw the two of you together, I was like, oh my God, this is really interesting. And it was I'm a CEO. You run a professional association. A lot of development for me is serious. I go to governance workshops and all these things about the mechanics and logistics of running an association. But to do something like this that sparked my curiosity and my energy, and really helped me rethink about this connection to people. And I've worked in this change space for a long time. So the theme about change is really important. I really want to change the conversation about how we talk about change.
Oh, okay. Well, we've got to,
but that could be another podcast.
It is another podcast, but like, I'm curious, like, can you share like the cliff notes of what you're thinking? Because I think you did ask a really great question around the word change in that workshop and the baggage. We just before spoke about icebreakers and networking, and change kind of has the same thing. It just brings up those. Yes. And what are you thinking around that?
Oh, there's so much.
Okay.
I think, I've worked in that big transformation change space, and I was talking with someone yesterday. I think we've become a bit addicted to transformational change around let's sweep through a whole organization and so people are going through this every 2 or 3 years. And I think what gets lost quite often is we focus on articulating what the change is. We put all our investment into standing a change up, but time and time again, that's when the investment stops. And organizations, and you'd know this, don't put time into building that, helping rebuild the culture and and settle. There's always stuff that doesn't work out. You need like 18 months or 2 years after a big change to really embed it. You can't just go, yeah, new structure in place, fantastic, let's go. I see that. And, I've seen the impact of people go through multiple changes. When it's good, it's fantastic. They feel part of it. But when it's bad, it's horrid. And I think we can do change better.
Do it better. I know. I mean, there's all those alarming stats that MBS shared about how most change fails, and it's like all the literature and everyone talking about it and all the change is happening. We still haven't improved it. So I'm so excited to see what you create in that space.
Yeah, it'll see. I'm not in a big organisation anymore, so the way that I influence change will be different. I think there's something we just assume leaders can do change well. But actually, and middle managers and team leaders and even individuals, but actually we've got to help them build the skills to be able to navigate it and to have some of the difficult conversations when you're going through change, but also to involve people in it. Like, we're really fearful of co-designing change with people in the workplace.
Yeah, it's so weird.
I saw your face.
No, well, it's because everyone's like, how do I bring people on the journey? And it's like, you bring them on the journey. Like, that's the answer. But I think, and where I got in trouble working in big corporations when I was, I guess I'd say, poor at leading change, was when I'd like be in the background making things, and then I'd be like, ta-da, and hadn't engage anyone, as opposed to a new sort of different approach now where it's all about co-designing and that facilitative approach for sure.
Yeah. And it just, I'm sure there's research and data out there about what a difference it makes. But I think probably for you and I, we intuitively know it. But it scares me. You talked about MBS and the stats he used. I always talk about 70% of, big change projects fail. I use that when I talk about change. But for me, the scary bit was when he said that same research has been happening for 40 years and we haven't changed that stat in 40 years with all of our knowledge, with all of our investment in leadership and development. That is scary.
It's shocking.
It's a big challenge, but it's a great opportunity. We can get better at this.
Absolutely.
My final reflection on change, because I could talk about this forever, is I just think that through COVID, because we had to change so quickly, we now have a mindset, well, actually, we can do change. I think we've forgotten that we did that in the face of an emergency. And so people did move quickly and do all of those things, but that's not how we should manage change ongoing.
Yeah, that's a really interesting reflection prompt as well. I kind of use it the other way when governments aren't implementing change quickly. I'm like, you could do it. And you did it in COVID.
Yes. You can do change nimbly, but not just we have to change because of this thing. You've got to, like you say, you've got to bring people along. You've got to involve them, all of those pieces.
Absolutely. Yeah. Now, just on the concept of change, and you run an annual conference, so there might be pressure to change what you do every year. I mean, or maybe not. Maybe there's a great sort of recipe you've created.
Yeah.
How do you kind of balance that sort of keeping fresh with maintaining expectations or exceeding them?
Yeah, look, it's a really interesting one. I think I'm in the lucky position because in my role, I can say, hey, let's change it up. So every year we refresh the organising committee. The conference that you were part of this year, it was the second year that we've run it in a new way. And so we've built into the culture of the organising committee, space to be playful, to be curious. What do they bring? And I really don't want to do a rinse and repeat. I think I've seen quite often with events, it's quite easy to say, okay, here we go again. What's the theme going to be? What's the dates? What's the venue? Where are we going to go for dinner? That's, I think that's a bit Groundhog Day. And so if you can build, you've got to do all of those things, but if you can build in some space for that creativity and thinking, and we're working on the third iteration of this conference, so the discussion about themes is going to be fascinating.
Yeah.
Our first conference, the theme, and we deliberately went with one word, and it's really hard to get that one word right, but the first word was around bravery. Coming out of COVID, tertiary education has to be brave to lead the change that it needs to do, and individuals have to be brave in an organisation. This year, there's such a discussion about what is the role of higher education, what's the role of vocational education. So we had the theme of purpose. So, it wasn't just we picked a word that sounded good. It was, a lot of discussion about how do you take what's happening and what's the change you want to make. We wanted people to be brave. We want people to work with purpose.
Yeah.
So this third word of what we choose is going to be fascinating. But you've got to give people space to do that. You can't just say, put you in a room, 10 minutes, come up with a thing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. Actually, I know on the social wall, post the events, and some guests were already jumping in and saying what they want the word to be next year.
No.
So, yeah, really, I know it's a big. Well, this is great, right? Then you're already getting interest and excitement for next year's event, which is perfect.
Yeah, I think though we're going to have to break some hearts this year because people are really passionate about the work that they're putting forward.
I know.
I've got board members sending me texts going, I reckon it should be this. And I'm like, so no pressure at all for this year's organising committee.
It's almost as important as like where you're hosting it, like the theme, right? It's just seems like that kind of, which I love. And I think it's because the theme is anchored into everything, like who you choose as keynotes, what the sessions are, reflection questions as well. And I think just on purpose, like what I found interesting is because like I work with conferences and sometimes it's like speaking or it's MC, but it's never this role that you created, that was created by the committee, the conference catalyst. And I just wanted to just talk about that quickly because there's listeners around the world that are helping out with these conferences. What is the role of a conference catalyst? Like this hybrid, I mean, I had to ask you that question as well. Like, what is this role?
It's really interesting. It emerged from, I chaired an organising committee probably 2017, and we worked with someone who's on my list of amazing people, and I would work with, again and again, Jason Clark, who's based down here in Melbourne. And so we had hired him as the MC, but actually in working with him, he wasn't the MC. He really became part of the conference. I've always held that in mind. So over the last 2 years with this new conference, we've really explored, could the role of MC actually be something different? I think it's not just that, we ask you to step up on stage and tell people what's happening and introduce, but you're part of the conference, you're part of the personality, you're helping people build that experience and gather meaning and connection and all of that. So last year we had an amazing woman called Jaisal Shaw, and we did an unconference on the third day of the conference. And, that was something new that we tested and trialed. And then this year having you and, your energy and buzz, but, we really wanted to help build that connection piece. It was a really strong theme from last year. And so you were able to come in and do that. And I loved that you went to conference sessions and really soaked up the experience. You understood what delegates were experiencing and you could share that. And I think we say to people, you can shape the catalyst role to be whatever you want and it will grow and change from year to year. But it's really to be a spark, I suppose.
Yeah. I love that.
Did I capture that?
You really captured it. Yeah. And I think it's great because it's such an interesting, it's very innovative. And so I would love to share that. I mean, we're definitely going to take out this snippet and share it and be like, hey, maybe at your conference, you consider this type of role and listen to this podcast and ML talking about that.
I feel I need to copyright it because
I think so.
I hadn't realized that we were doing something different.
Yeah, you are. Yeah, I love it. More than just an MC. It's so good. So now on that, I want to talk about your facilitation because it was hilarious. You talked about these keystone sessions we ran after lunch. And every time I caught up with you after, you're like, oh, my blue team were amazing. And they were cheering. And like, I was like, what are you doing in this room, ML? So I'm curious around like your facilitation style and.
Yeah, it was. The Blue Crew, and it comes through in actually the feedback survey. But I love, what were your top 3 highlights? Oh, the Blue Room. I think for me, because I had been in the background for the conference, and even on that first day, I was, in the office fixing things. So actually to get out on the floor and with a group of people, I just suddenly was joyous. And I remember what it was like going to my first ATEM conference many years ago. I bought myself and I mucked around at times. We had, there was funny moments like the conference photographer would come in and I would joke about whenever there's a conference photo, I'm sort of mid discussion and I look like that. And so I just turned to him and said, let's get this over with. And I did the silly pose and, so every time the photographer came back, there was great joy and excitement about what would happen. But it was just really helping people to find, I had to bring energy into the room. It was post-lunch. They needed that. But I was absolutely delighted to meet each one of them and hear about them as well. We just injected fun into it. You know, we got competitive with the other room about, you know, who was wooing when. And even on the last day when the photographer came into the room, like someone said, can we do a group photo? You know, come on. And so something happened in those 3 days. This group formed and stormed and normed and did all those things. But I think at the heart of it, they had fun.
Yeah, I'm with you. And also, like, you have that natural curiosity around, I'm genuinely curious, like, what do you know, who are you? What are you learning? And creating that. And so let's talk about your energy and like, how do you prepare? I know this is more like, wasn't really, I mean, you do other facilitation as well.
Yeah.
How do you like to prepare for an upcoming workshop? Like, what's your process?
I think it's a bit like you've got to invest in it. You just can't. I have seen people rock up in a room and deliver with very little preparation. And I look around and go, how do you do that? Like for me, I've got to be a bit more thoughtful and I need some time and space over a period of weeks. And so I think you've got to get to know your client. You've got to get to know the people in the room. So I think a couple of conversations with who you're working with as a minimum and testing some ideas about how we might do this. And it varies. Like sometimes I'm journaling in a book, other times I'm putting sticky notes up on the window here with ideas and just capturing things and then letting it percolate and then starting to shape a format as well. Yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of like that divergent thinking and the creativity and then going, right, let's land this plane. Let's converge on something.
Oh. And look, you just want to stuff so much in, don't you? Like I could do this, I could do this. What about if we did that? So you sort of almost have to put it out and then bring it back.
Yeah. Actually, the other day when I was in Gippsland, Victoria, I had like, you know, 3 different ways of doing this thing. And I'm like, I can't. And sometimes when you have to put it on a PowerPoint, it's just so limiting. So actually just wrote on a Post-it card. And when it came to that point, I was like, okay, we're going to skip and do this. You know, just having that sort of flexibility and not being stuck in that linear process because you don't know sometimes what's going to emerge. And I know Jason Fox talks about that a lot.
Yeah. Oh, I see another one person that we love and have in common as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think if I think back to maybe when I started facilitating about 20 years ago, I would really stagecraft it, you know, by the end of this session, you want this, etc. But actually if you can create the space for exploration, you can go in different ways and you sort of have to be prepared for that. You've got to work with your client. You've got to know what they want to get out of it. But yeah, the space, I've got to think about this, but the space to explore, to be thoughtful. And you're building culture. When you're in a room with people, you are adding to their culture. And so it's not you're starting a new culture, you are just doing something to build upon the culture that's there. And I think there's a great responsibility with that as well.
Oh, I really like that. And it's interesting, like you said, a client can have an outcome, but 5 different facilitators could approach it in completely different ways and still get the outcome. So it's such an interesting process. So do you have a favorite workshop activity or a question, Emma?
Oh, you and I have talked about something I tried recently. So, I mean, there are things, you always have your bag of tricks, but I did one recently. I've done it twice now where I've worked with a group of senior executives and right at the start, not an icebreaker, but I was thinking about they race in from a busy day, inbox, all of that. And so I did this thing to break the energy. I asked people to shut their eyes and we visualize 2 things. The first one is visualize all the emails in your inbox suddenly get wings, a bit like Harry Potter, and all the emails you see flying out of your inbox. So take a moment and visualize that and watch them all go until you've got 0 emails in your inbox. And there's great joy and ripples and people love that. And then, you know, after a pause, the next bit is, well, I now want you to visualize your team, your people. So they're really in control, they're calm. Everything that happens while you're in this room, they're going to take care of. So I want you to visualize your team. And give them some quiet, and then we break. And it's just, it's been interesting. It's something I've tried and, you know, I've done it twice, but it's worked twice. But it is that, how do you break people from galloping in, here's the next task I've got to do, there's all this whirring in the background. How do you get them into that space?
Yeah, I'm with you. Like, yeah, and I think, just having those multiple tabs open and not even just being, all right, I'm actually here. Like, I did something similar actually, the other day. I mean, well, I guess it was similar to what I did at the conference. It's kind of like a hybrid between what you just shared, because I love that. And also, you know how you got people to take out their phone and just shut their tabs down and count? And I think just going like, here's a tab in front of you. This is the main tab. I'm just bringing that analogy in. And it's like, because you got all these tabs going on in the background that are chewing up your battery, right? Yeah. They're taking the bandwidth away from it's tab here.
And I also think when we invite people into a facilitated space, there's a sense of, I know what's going to happen. And they'll go, oh, yeah, I can do this, but I don't need to be fully present because I can check my emails and stuff like that. And so we need to break that cycle. So, yeah, we've learnt to have, someone at the conference had more than 70 tabs open on their phone. Having said that, yesterday I did mine and I had 36 and I thought of you. But it's a great metaphor for actually this is how we now operate. We never used to be like that.
No, we never used to. We never used to parallel process, but now we do it like, we have multiple parallel streams running. Yeah. So, Emma, is there anything else you'd like to share with any first-time facilitators that are listening?
Well, I suppose it's the themes of what we've spoken about. That bit about learning to be yourself, I think is really important, about not overly stage managing an experience. I think when you're starting out, that's a defense mechanism. So trying to be kind to yourself about that. And I think we often focus on the experience of the people in the room, but it's got to be fun for you as well. You have to enjoy it. So, find a way that it tops your bucket up as well.
That is something that you said to me. I remember we were talking about the role and you're like, Leanne, I just want you to enjoy yourself. And I remember I actually told my husband that. I was like, that is like the sweetest thing. Like, this is so generous.
I remember that moment because you actually stopped and went, oh. And I remember at the time thinking, oh, did I need to say that? Isn't that just assumed? And then I'm like, oh, actually, no, we do need to give people permission. So, yes. Yeah.
But I think, and you're right. Like, if you enjoy yourself, but it's natural, right? But it's a lovely thing to call out. So again, that's why you're here, just to share some of these interesting snippets from ML. ML, if any of our listeners would love to reach out, connect with you, where should we send them?
So the beautiful thing about my parents is there's only one Mary-Louise Huppatz. So if you Google me or if you look for me on LinkedIn, you'll be able to connect with me pretty quickly, or you can find me through ATEM, the Association for Tertiary Education Management. I love to connect with people. So, reach out, connect.
Amazing. And we'll put a link to everything in the show notes for this one. ML, talking about connections, so great to connect with you and reflect as well. Thanks so much for being a guest on the show. It's been awesome.
Thank you.